thank you for joining me. Today I want to talk about the loneliness, the sometimes loneliness of self-actualization. It is the road less travelled, and for those of us who choose to go down it, it can at times feel very isolating, and I just wanted to make a video about it because it's something that I have experienced. And it's something that I think many people have experienced who have gone down this path. There are many ancient writings about it, and we even see an example in the Bible with Jesus, So anybody who decides to take their spiritual journey, that journey of self-actualization, of self-empowerment, on a quite deep level, they will find that it will be necessary at some point to draw back from the normal connections and to disassociate from certain people and to really spend a lot of time going within. And there's nothing wrong with this. And maybe if you know somebody who's going through this, this might help give you a little bit of enlightenment as to why it happens. I think in our culture, especially the Western culture, it's people who are lone wolves are perceived as loners, as sad, as undesirables. Sometimes they're also perceived as a threat because, our culture is built around a sense of community, and it's still very tribal in nature in that sense. And sometimes somebody who is able to step away from the tribe, is able to step away from social groups in order to take whatever time they need to themselves, is seen as a threat to other people because it causes them to say, well, hang on a minute, what's wrong with us that you would choose to step away? But in actuality, it's not about what's wrong with others. It's about what you're going through on your own personal level, in your own personal journey. And I mean, I have experienced this, and to a certain extent, I am still in this. I wonder sometimes whether this is, part of my journey that's going to continue for quite some time, because as I go deeper and deeper and deeper and become more and more self-actualized, it becomes a more intense process. There is a way, and I'm at a point now where I am more sociable, I have more contacts, and I am engaged more socially, and I enjoy it, and it's nice. I know my boundaries with it though. I know the line. I know the line that I won't cross, because for me there is a case of too much time. When too much time is spent around other people, I realise that the balance in myself starts to get upset. But the reason why, anyway, it is so important to not chastise yourself or feel like a weirdo or think there's something wrong with you if you find yourself drawing away, is because what you're going through is ultimately an extremely delicate and powerful process. And if you are trying to be socially active, if you're trying to play the same roles that you once did before you had this dark night of the soul, before you had this moment of realization where you understood that actually everything you had been before and everything you've been doing was not an example of your true self, was not actually how you wanted to be living. Before you have that, you're playing a lot of roles. We always play roles to different people. And so as you wake up to this notion, you realise, okay, well actually maybe that didn't represent me so well. And so those roles become harder to play as you're going through a process of transformation. And it can actually, I feel, do a lot of damage if you try and continue the status quo. It can slow down your process and give you a lot of internal struggles and a lot of internal battles, because on one hand you're trying to maintain the status quo, but yet on the other hand you're growing so much on the inside and you're self-actualizing, you're transforming, and it's something that quite often you can't put into words. It's something that's hard to describe to others who haven't been through it before or don't understand it, or who maybe aren't on a spiritual or consciously spiritual path. So it can cause you to end up with a tug of war within yourself. Because essentially what you're being asked to do, what your soul is asking you to do, is to get to the essence of yourself, to find your truth, and to start living from there, because up until this point, you haven't been. Maybe you have at times, but not fully. And it's become too painful. It's become too painful to not live your truth. That's when we have these dark nights of the soul, and in my experience, it was exactly the same. I carried on. Mine happened at about the age of 26, and I'd had an incredibly colourful childhood, with a lot of turbulence and trauma, but yet some beautiful experiences too. And of course this was quite confusing in some ways, although I always had my spirituality deep down, and I had my faith, and I knew that somehow it was teaching me something. Of course, as I grew into adulthood, I formed a self as a result of what I'd been through, and interacted with the world through this self. And then at 26, after the breakup of a relationship, I felt what felt like my entire world collapsing, and I remember it very vividly. One day, literally collapsing on the floor in my flat, crying my eyes out, and suddenly everything hitting me, and seeing that everything I'd been, how I'd been behaving, how I treated myself, how I treated others, everything I believed about myself had been causing me so much pain, and it became too painful to be that person anymore. The pain of reacting from these old programs was just too immense, and in that came a surrender, a huge surrender to, okay, well, I'm willing to start again, because I obviously I have no idea. I have not been living true to who I am, and it's quite liberating. It's like a birth, you know. There are the tears, there is the pain, there is the push, and then there's the surrender and the release. And funnily enough, on that day, I had this breakdown, and I remember I took myself to lie on my bed and just laid there, tears kind of streaming down my face, and closed my eyes. And it was a sunny day, and I remember very clearly. And I closed my eyes, and I felt this huge hand, massive, just scoop me up, just all around me in this amazing warmth. And I suddenly got visions of me in the future. I saw myself smiling, I saw myself happy. I saw what was translated to me as what was coming for me as a result of my letting go of this old self. So you see, it's a very deep process, and it requires a certain amount of surrender and trust and faith. And we have been led away from our intuition, we've been led away from our connection to source, to God, to the universe, whatever you want to call it. We've been led away from that for so many years, but now people are starting to come back and starting to trust that actually there is more power in surrendering to that energy, to my inner being who knows exactly what I need and what is right for me. There's more power in that than trying to control the way everyone sees me, than trying to play a certain role in order to fit in, or then believing, you know, certain things that were maybe told to you in childhood that aren't actually true of you. So it's an incredible experience, and it's something I'm so passionate about. I feel it's my duty to help people through this process, because it's beautiful and it's stunning, and the rewards are immense, but it's messy too. It's messy, and it can be dark, and it can be ugly, and it can be painful, but that's the beauty of it. You know, it's a very natural process. And when you think about Mother Earth, when you think about nature, she can be messy, she can be destructive. The destruction of something can be so dramatic, but yet, after that, what springs forth, the life she gives, is renewed, it's beautiful, it's fresh, and it's strong. And it's the same process that we go through when we go through this dark night of the soul, when we go through our soul rebirth, when we ascend, when we rise up from the dead. So it's a very similar thing. And so because of this, it can be like I said, it can be very hard to associate with the same people or to associate with anybody because you have so much to integrate. You literally start almost downloading different aspects of yourself, seeing aspects of yourself you've never seen before. And this takes time, you know? And I'm very much reminded of the caterpillar when it goes into its cocoon. And is that what it is? It's a chrysalis, sorry. When it goes into the chrysalis. And the caterpillar literally turns to goo. There is no caterpillar in that chrysalis, which I think is incredible. It just shows you that life is not the physical. We are not our bodies. Because that caterpillar completely turns to a liquid, but in it is the DNA and the consciousness for a beautiful new being. The DNA is being restructured so it can then spring forth as a butterfly. This is the same thing that happens to us. We literally turn to goo. The ego turns to goo. It suddenly goes, I thought I knew, I don't know. I thought I was doing the right thing. I obviously wasn't doing what was serving me best. And everything becomes confusing and turns to goo. But in that, there's the DNA is still there, and this is why the trust is so important and the surrendering to the process is so important, because the DNA, the consciousness, your higher self, is there, and it is birthing this new form that you will take. So, I suppose really, what I want to say is you don't have to cut everybody out of your life. It doesn't have to be like that. And I didn't, I maintained some relationships, but I maintained them at a distance. And it's not an option for everybody to cut people out of their lives, and I'm not suggesting that. There will be some people who will be very understanding of what you're going through. And if you're lucky enough to have friends or family like that, then you're truly blessed. I have some friends who are very enlightened and who have been through similar things, and it's lovely because we allow each other that grace and that space to go within. And if I don't see them for 6 months or however long, it's not a problem. I understand you have to do what you've got to do. It's a beautiful process. And so you're very lucky and you're very blessed if you have people like that around you. If you have people in your life who maybe don't understand, and chances are, what I will say, the people who I've found are more likely to go through this process. I mean, at some point we're all going to have to, whether you do it in this lifetime or you do it in the next lifetime. It is the resurrection at the end of the day. It is the ascension that we are all being asked to face at some point, but some people will do it in this lifetime and some won't. But what I will say is that there are certain people among us who are more likely to go through it. And those of you who are more likely to go through it are those of you who have probably had quite confusing, quite tough childhoods, or confusing and harsh experiences, because they will drive you to the source of yourself, because there's nothing greater, nothing that is a more powerful teacher than pain. And quite often, if you've experienced a lot of pain in your past, you will be more likely to be driven to find your true self far quicker, should you choose to work with that pain. Other people who are more likely to go through it are people who are very sensitive souls, very keenly aware souls, who've always felt somehow different, who've always felt maybe just not quite understood. So those are the two groups that I notice tend to come to this point. Probably, usually before their 40s. It's happening more and more now. But everybody can, should they choose to. And we will all be called to do it at some point. If you have had very tough experiences, if you have family that has in some way traumatized you or abused you or caused you a lot of pain, and you're going through this, my best advice is do what you can to respect your process and give yourself the love and the time that you need, and give yourself the space as much space as is healthy and as you can, within reason, from those people, not because they are bad people, but because when we come from a family that is that has patterns of abuse in it, or projection, or just any kind of traumatizing effects, quite often, unless our parents have, and it could be even siblings, unless they too have looked within, unless it's become too painful for them as well to live as they have been, they will continue those patterns. And so your shift, your change, this self-actualization will present them with a quandary. It may well threaten them. They may not understand what it is you're doing, what it is you're going through, and it could actually intensify any tension, any anger, because all of a sudden you're doing that thing that maybe you never did in childhood, or even as an adult. You're saying, hang on a minute, I'm important now. I need to respect myself. Instead of being always putting them first or always giving, you're kind of going, actually no, I've got a very big thing going on within me, and I'm going to respect myself enough to take myself away and give myself some space. People who are caught up in their negative programs, people who can't see themselves clearly, who haven't done the inner work, often get threatened by somebody who they love and who they care about doing that work, because it presents a fear that they might lose them. They might lose that supply. Suddenly you're changing and you're transforming, and that can be a big threat. It can cause them to question themselves, and sometimes people don't want to question themselves. You know, a parent might not want to look at their behaviour and say, hang on a minute, what have I done? And your transformation could well trigger that in them. And if they are very staunch and very rigid, and they don't want to see that perhaps the part they played in it, or the pain that they've carried their whole life, they've then passed on to you, then it will cause them to feel very uncomfortable. And so this is where it can become very tense in relation to family. And I think it's wise to take whatever space is reasonable and that you can do without, you know, antagonizing the situation. It's up to everybody on an individual level. Some people will just go, you know what, I'm going to completely take myself away, and they're comfortable with that, that's fine. Some people have to maintain those relationships to a certain degree. But give yourself whatever peace you can, whether it's taking yourself off to meditate, getting away, giving yourself private space, going for a drive, being somewhere where you can be alone just to be with you and this process. In terms of friends, quite often the friends that we've made up until that point, not all of them, but a lot of them have been friends that have been built around the old self, the old ego, and that play into the old ego. We play into each other's kind of patterns, you know. So say you were a big drinker and party animal, and suddenly you have this kind of dark night of the soul and this transformational process. To then continue to be very close to those friends obviously is going to be a hard thing to do, because now you're not doing the same things you once were. What maybe brought you together is now something that no longer works for you. So once again, this is an example of where you have to give yourself time and allow yourself space. You don't have to drop people completely. And it's wise to say to people, I'm going through something on the inside and I don't quite understand it, or if you do, you can explain it if you feel comfortable doing that. But just to let them know. And then when the time is right, when you're at a point where you're clear enough to go, okay, this person I want in my life, that person I don't think we work anymore. When you're clear enough to do that, you then can. But you don't have to make any decisions straight away. You can put that on the back burner until you are ready to. And ultimately, the people who that you see this period through with, the ones that have understanding and respect and the friendships you carry forward after this process will be of lasting value. But I do want to reiterate the point that there is nothing wrong with you or anybody who is going through this process and who draws themselves away. And it's not nice to shame people for it, you know, and to say, oh look, you know, you don't have very many friends, obviously people don't like you, or to ridicule people, or to kind of project in a mean way onto them, because you don't know what they're going through. You have to have some compassion. And anything that is deeply transformative and that requires high consciousness and that is a true change requires introspection and love and gentleness and self-respect. So the process has to be honoured. I know it can be difficult, but what you come out with afterwards is an incredible sense of self and strength. And you're no longer reliant on the perceptions of others or on certain false relationships to provide you with security. You're strong enough to say, I can walk this path alone if I need to, although you won't walk it alone, because others will find you, others of like mind will find you. And we light up like beacons to each other. And that's the beautiful thing about it. But the lovely thing is you're no longer a slave to those old relationships, those old unhealthy patterns, or those old ways of being. And it does set you free. It's just a process that requires gentleness and understanding and delicacy. So I hope that that's helped. I'll be doing more videos on this subject, and yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, as I said, and it's what I am choosing to help people through in this lifetime. So take care. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.